Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming today. We have just a few more people that are going to be popping on, and then we'll go ahead and get started in a few minutes. For those of you guys who don't know me, my name is Shelly Bennett. I'm the Public Relations Manager for Midas Gold, Idaho, and I will be handling all of your questions today while Dale is presenting. If you have any questions at all, you can go ahead and put those in the chat forum at the bottom of your screen, or you can pull up the Q&A and type those in there. And we do have a few spots throughout the presentation where we will be stopping to answer any questions, but please feel free to ask as we go along. Dale, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, I don't think I'm muted. No, I'm not muted. Hi, everybody. I'm Dale Kerner. I'm the Permitting Manager with Midas Gold. I appreciate you getting on today to hear some more information about our project. And we're all excited. Our draft DEIS is out, and we appreciate having the opportunity to give you information about the project so you can make and submit an informed comment to the draft DEIS. So Shelly, I'll fire away whenever you say.
Yeah, let's go ahead and get started. Again, you guys can pop in your questions down at the bottom of your screen, either in the Q&A box or in the chat box.
Yeah, and I'll note we've got some other folks from Midas on today as well. So we've got access to a lot of expertise, so feel free to ask whatever you like. Again, thanks for joining us today. Let me get to the... Today's discussion is about the ModPRO, the Modified Proposed Action that Midas Gold submitted subsequent to the PRO, the Plan of Restoration and Operation. So today I'd like to just do a little bit of a recap about the project as we originally submitted it, and then get into why the ModPRO was created and what benefits it includes, what improvements it includes. And then we'll transition into a discussion of the full draft DEIS and all the alternatives that are included within it, and why we believe that the ModPRO is the best of the alternatives. It's certainly our preferred alternative, and we'd like to demonstrate to you why that's so, and give you a little bit of information about it. And again, we'll have a couple of periods here for answering questions. If you have any, please feel free to submit. So let's get going. Hopefully you've been to one of our previous presentations. There have been many, and you know that the Stibnite Gold project is a great opportunity to take a legacy mining area and reclaim it and restore it through additional mining and the funding that comes out of that additional mining. It's a very good plan. We believe in it, and we've got a great team to execute it. You probably also have seen this map of the location of the Stibnite Gold project east of McCall. It's out there. It takes a while to get out there. And one of our initial evaluations was for building a better access road to the site. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. But we're out there east of Yellow Pine, about 10, 11 miles out near the Thunder Mountain Mining District as well. So the PRO, the Plan of Restoration and Operations. The PRO was submitted to the Forest, they're the lead agency, the United States Forest Service, in September of 2016. This was a document that was a long time in preparation. A lot of thoughtful planning went into the PRO. And again, the natural resource restoration via private investment is one of the biggest benefits of this plan, and one of the main principles that we incorporated into this plan to clean up these legacy impacts, via the resources that we're gaining from additional mining. A lot of upside to this project, including restoring salmon migration into the upper East Fork of the South Fork of the Salmon River. We'll look at that habitat here in a moment. And of course, the economic benefits of a project like this are many, well-paying jobs and putting a lot of people to work, and we want to put as many Idahoans to work as we can here. The picture on the left is the Stibnite Mining District and the footprint of the legacy operations that have taken place over a century. a lot of detail here and a lot of features, but the main thing I'd like you to get out of this is just the overall disturbance footprint. You know, when we designed the Pro, which are the features on the right, there was very definitely an attempt to maximize the use of that previously disturbed surface. So you'll see the somewhat similar shape to the Pro features that are on the right. There are additional disturbances of undisturbed land. However, we made every attempt to minimize those, and as you'll see in the ModPRO 2, we made a refinement to the Pro to further reduce those impacts. One of the things I'd like you to get out of looking at this feature is the location of the Yellow Pine Pit, which we saw in that previous photo. The Yellow Pine Pit is at the northernmost end of this project, and all of the drainages that you see here, the East Fork of the South Fork, which continues up this way, Meadow Creek up here, Blowout Creek, all these drainages coalesce and flow to the north. So the Yellow Pine Pit is a very important location. It's a very important restoration target because it, again, restores access for anadromous fish into those upper portions of the drainage. So a very important target for the project. You know, reclamation versus restoration is, you know, the plan of restoration and operations is very specifically named that because there are restoration principles incorporated into the plan. There are some good examples of reclamation out at the Stibnite mining district at present. There have been some reclamation projects that have stabilized and to some degree repaired some of the damages that had been done out there over the past. The picture on the left here is a restored channel that is lined with riprap and to some degree has been revegetated. However, you know, although that is a very stable channel, it doesn't create a lot of opportunity for spawning and rearing habitat. It's effective in doing what it's supposed to do, and that is to divert water around a legacy feature and get it out of the upper portion of the Meadow Creek drainage. But there's additional opportunities to design something like this so that it's got more function, more ecologic function. So the artist's rendition on the right is something that is a better example of restoration, restoring a channel to a more natural, dynamic system with a lot of vegetation on the banks to reduce sediment influx and stabilize those banks, generate you know, higher quality habitat while still allowing that river to behave like a river and migrate over time. So that's the difference between reclamation and restoration, and one of the reasons we feel confident in using that term in the description of our project. Here's another picture of the Yellow Pine Pit. Again, this is at the northern end of the site. Very important restoration target for us. You'll see that there's a pit there now, and I think you can see this in the next photo better. But the upstream cascade coming into the Yellow Pine Pit is a passage to fish swimming upstream. They can't get up that steep gradient. So since 1938, anadromous fish have been unable to get past that point in the project, which again is on the northern down gradient edge of the project. And we'll have a look at Blowout Creek here in a moment, but a lot of sediment filling the Yellow Pine Pit is from Blowout Creek, and we've got plans to address that issue. So this is not a feature that will last in perpetuity. Eventually, the Yellow Pine Pit, if left untouched, and Blowout Creek, if left untouched, would fill in with sediment. Eventually, that sediment would bypass this feature and get into the lower part of the East Fork of the South Fork. So here's an artist's rendition, again, of restoration. You know, building a dynamic system that behaves the way a riparian corridor should. One of the first things we do at the Yellow Pine Pit is to install a 0.9 mile long tunnel around the western edge of it to divert the East Fork of the South Fork while we are conducting operations in the Yellow Pine Pit. This also will serve as an interim measure for allowing fish to get upstream in the East Fork of South Fork of Salmon River drainage. So a very interesting design. You know, this is not something that's unprecedented. This has been done before, and we've got a very sound design for constructing that tunnel for several species of fish to swim upstream. we are going to permanently, after mining, permanently restore the channel across the backfill. And again, we want this to be a very dynamic system, to behave as a river system should, to be able to migrate for the cut bank and the point bars to migrate and move across this valley floor and deposit sediment and have off-channel pools, etc. And again, allowing access to upstream habitat in the upper east fork of the south fork. And we've taken a look at these habitats, and in some cases, there's very high quality habitat in the upper east fork of the south fork. I'm showing you this photo because when we start talking about alternatives, one of the alternatives would eradicate this habitat in the upper east fork of the south fork of the Salmon River drainage. So we'll be seeing this photo again, but some examples here of very nice habitat, good shade on the channel, a lot of coarse woody debris, off-channel pools, low gradient, good fisheries habitat. Additional legacy features at the site. Again, if you've been on any of our other talks, you're probably familiar with these features, but again, we're just doing a quick recap here. Down at the south end of the site, we've got a large feature called the SODA, the Spent Ore Disposal Area, and you'll see it being constructed in that photo. And the material underlying the SODA is a much finer grain material that is constituted of Bradley era tailings. So we've got millions of tons of this material, and again, the Pro was very thoughtful in that it incorporated the reclamation of these legacy features into the plans for the mine, so that spent ore, which is rather inert material, will be incorporated into the starter dam for the tailings storage facility, and the underlying tailings, once that material on top is removed and repurposed into the dam, the underlying tailings will be reprocessed in our mill and then incorporated into our newly constructed, fully engineered and lined, composite lined tailings storage facility. Here's another view of the SODA, and in this we're looking again at this channel on the southeast edge of the SODA, which is reconstructed Meadow Creek. Again, a reclaimed channel, but one that's got very limited habitat function. So, this would be the drainage in which we propose to place the tailings storage facility, and in doing so, repurpose that overlying SODA, that spent ore material, and getting to the underlying tailings, and then eventually reconstructing this channel over the top of the tailings storage facility once those tailings have settled and dewatered. And that design also is a much more thoughtful and design that's meant to be a more dynamic system and behaving as a riparian corridor should. Then finally, Blowout Creek on the south end of the site, not necessarily within our footprint of the mine, but an important feature for us to reclaim because of the amount of sediment that this generates. During spring runoff, you'll see a photo there, that inset photo of the sediment-laden water that comes off of the Blowout Creek area during spring runoff every year. So big sediment generator, and you can see the alluvial fan at the base of that. We're going to put some interim measures into Blowout Creek very early on in the life of the mine to first stabilize this feature, and then eventually put additional material into that channel and vegetate it later on in the life of the mine. So restoring this channel is very important to build in a healthy system, for this entire upper East Fork, South Fork Salmon River drainage. And here again, just a recap of the life of the mine: 3 years of construction on the front end, followed by 12 years, possibly a few more, of operations, and then followed by closure. We're showing you this diagram here to demonstrate, before we do any mining in what on here is year 4, the installation of this tunnel around the Yellow Pine pit to provide an interim migration route for anadromous fish. The removal of spent ore in the Meadow Creek Valley and incorporation of tailings storage facility. Reprocessing the underlying tailings beginning in the first year of operations. A lot of these these benefits from addressing these legacy materials and features is going to come very early on in the project. And then eventually, you know, in the closure period, we'll restore that channel across the Yellow Pine pit and build a permanent, albeit dynamic, system that will allow for fish passage in the long term. So here's the, you know, if we pull back to 5,000 feet and get the, here we are looking to the northwest at the restored site, and I'll just point out a few features here. You know, here's the north end of the site where we've restored the East Fork of the South Fork across the Yellow Pine pit. The west end pit lake is here. This will remain as a pit lake. After that open pit is done being mined, as will the Hanger Flats pit lake. We'll talk about this a little bit more in the ModPRO discussion. You know, restored or, you know, reestablished passage through the site as it is today. You can drive through the site and get up to Thunder Mountain Road here on its southeast edge. And we will reestablish that passage. Restored Blowout Creek. This was the scoured drainage that you saw in a previous photo. You know, restoring that channel there, first stabilizing and then restoring. We'll have a rock check dam at this point of the old dam failure to get groundwater elevations back up in that area and get those wetlands restored. And then here's the tailings storage facility, the reclaimed tailings storage facility. And you can see that this is a large feature, and definitely was part of the evaluation both before the PRO was developed and even afterward. And you'll see that it's part of an agency alternative that we'll be discussing here in a moment. But I'm going to take a break there and see if we've got any questions. I know that was a quick recap, but I see there's at least one question on here.
Yeah, Dale. So somebody would like to know if you can explain why the West End and Hanger Flats pits will not be filled in.
Well, that's a great question. And you know, to some degree, it's and Gene, please feel free to, Shelley, if you can unmute Gene. I don't know if you're controlling that. He
can unmute. He's good.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll let him take the first crack at that. Gene, do you want to take a swing?
It's a largely a mining sequence question, especially for West End, in that West End is the last pit to be mined, and the rock from West End is necessary to fill in the Yellow Pine pit in order to allow reestablishment of the East Fork. If you left the Yellow Pine pit as a whole, it would just be the same problem as present day. So all the rock from West End is actually going into the Yellow Pine pit to construct the final landforms over there. And then West End is the final pit. So then there's no rock source that doesn't involve a rehandle, and a rehandle from one of the now distant other rock sources in one of the development rock facilities elsewhere is a whole lot of money for little benefit, given what you could spend on that money on another restoration work, given that West End Creek is fishless, will always be fishless due to gradient and size.
All right. Anybody else? Thanks, Gene.
I think we're good, Dale. Okay.
If I can figure out my. So now we're going to kind of bring things into the now. We'll talk a little bit about the, you know, our NEPA and permitting schedule and where we're at, and then we'll do a little bit of a deeper dive on the ModPRO and talk about why we are requesting that, like, as I mentioned, the ModPRO is certainly our preferred alternative. We'd like to demonstrate to you why that is so and why we think it's the best option for the project. So here's, you may have seen this feature or this figure before, but these check boxes, this begins in the upper left and continues clockwise as we move through in time. The submittal of the PRO here in September of 2016 was followed by agency approval of the plan, administrative approval of the plan to be more specific, just that we had given them sufficient information to initiate the NEPA process. Pre-work and planning included the selection of a third-party contractor to assist the Forest Service with preparing the environmental impact statement document. And they kicked that process off by first conducting, internal and external scoping or public scoping, which is where they collected a lot of public comments on the project, and then started developing alternatives or a range of alternatives to the proposed action and conducting environmental analysis. And you can see the time periods here are long. There's several years that passed here when we were, when the agency was evaluating a range of alternatives. They would bring us a pool of alternatives and say, here's what we're looking at. And in some cases, we had already evaluated many of those alternatives. Midas Gold conducted a suite of trade-off studies during the development of the PRO, and to some degree, we were able to provide those and demonstrate to the agencies whether or not these were feasible alternatives or alternative components. For others, we conducted additional analysis and demonstrated either that they were reasonable alternative components to include, or in some cases they were not. And in a lot of instances, we would do preliminary engineering on something, or we'd look at the potential health and safety impacts and kind of run that through the ringer and see if it was actually a practicable alternative to include in the draft. So I think the numbers were something on the order of 50 plus alternative components that got winnowed down to about 13 or 14. So the draft DEIS then incorporated or took these alternative components, assembled them into several alternatives, 2 action alternatives from the agency to be precise. We also put together an additional alternative that we'll discuss here in a moment, the ModPRO. But the draft DEIS just came out on August 14th and is out for public comment. So that's where we are right now, hence the "we are here" bullet there. But the comment period will be a 60-day comment period, and we encourage people, regardless of where they stand on the project, to engage in the NEPA process. One of the reasons we're providing these webinars is so that people can make an informed opinion wherever they stand on the project, make an informed opinion by getting factual information about the project. So again, that draft DEIS comment period will be 60 days, and then we'll continue through the NEPA process. The agency and the third-party contractor will incorporate those comments. They'll consider, the input that comes from the public and agencies. Agencies will submit comments as well, and they'll prepare that final EIS. So the final EIS will select a preferred alternative based on all the input that's received, and the final EIS will be a pretty good demonstration or illustration of what the final project is going to look like. And then a draft record of decision will also be released with that final EIS. And the record of decision is the agency's decision on what is going to happen with the project. Is it going to be alternative 1, 2, 3, or 4, or the no action alternative? Is it going to have some modifications? Is it going to be a combination of some alternatives? There's a lot of things that are going to happen over the next 9, 12 months with regard to this project. We're just happy the draft is finally out, and we're excited about getting people engaged in reviewing and commenting on the draft. So I mentioned the long period of time while alternatives environmental analysis was being conducted, and it was around this time when this analysis was being conducted that the ModPRO surfaced. Now, the modified proposed action came about because, both Midas and the agencies and their consultants were looking at these preliminary environmental analyses. And we here at Midas, with our consultants, in many cases saw better ways of doing things. We could mitigate some of these environmental effects. We could, build a better mousetrap in some cases by tweaking the geometry or, making some relatively simple changes that really made for a better project. So the modified proposed action included about 8 components, which I'll walk through here with you just to demonstrate their benefits. But we submitted that in May of 2019 while the draft DEIS was being prepared, and it got incorporated into the draft DEIS as alternative 2. Now you'll note, as I'll illustrate here in a moment, the original PRO is also included in the draft DIS as alternative 1. Whereas, we didn't want to, or the agencies didn't want the public to feel that Midas had pulled a bait and switch by putting forth one proposal and then tweaking it and not having the original proposal in the draft DIS. So alternative 1 is meant to be that that original proposed action. But the ModPRO is certainly better. Another issue that came out of this environmental analysis and the development of these alternatives and agencies' review of the preliminary draft DIS were water quality issues. There are water quality issues at this site. It's a highly mineralized area, so there are very definitely impacts to water that just come because these drainages are the groundwater and the surface water is flowing through mineralized areas. That's why the mine is proposed here. This is a highly mineralized area, and there's also, of course, legacy issues out at the site that contribute to that to those water quality issues. So some of the agency comments to the preliminary draft DIS said the water quality or the water treatment plan or water management plan needs to be fleshed out in more detail. So that was something we did, from the preliminary draft to the draft that came out in August, was we more fully fleshed out that water quality management plan, or WQMP. So it has been incorporated into one of the alternatives of the draft DIS. We'll talk about that here in a moment. So I'd like to walk you through the components of the ModPRO, what we tweaked, why we feel this is a better alternative, why it is a better alternative than the proposed action, and then we'll compare this to the other additional action alternatives in the draft DIS, and just demonstrate to you why we feel this is the best option that's presented in the draft DIS. So here on the right is our project, and this is a figure out of the ModPRO. One of the first things you'll notice, and one of the first tweaks we made, is the missing, and I don't know if you noticed this on the first figure or not, but there was a development rock storage facility up slope of the west end pit that covered about, I believe, 70 acres or so, most of which was new disturbance. So in the ModPRO, we got rid of that west end DRSF and redistributed some of that material. Some of that material is used to backfill this midnight pit, kind of a sub pit of the west end pit, and other material from the west end pit is used to backfill the Hanger Flats pit lake and bring its depth up by about 450 feet. So originally the Hanger Flats pit lake was going to be 600 feet deep. Putting some of that west end material into this pit lake brings that depth up and mitigates some of the water temperature issues we were seeing in the modeling for the Hanger Flats pit lake. Number 2 is on-site lime generation. This is a very good example of an agency considered alternative component that Midas Gold vetted out very seriously, and through that vetting process we determined that because we have a large amount of carbonate rock on the site up here in the west end pit, there's a large amount of marble or metamorphosed limestone. We're going to mine that material anyway as development rock or overburden. So using that rock to generate lime on site in the lime kiln has a lot of benefits. One of the biggest ones is it reduces traffic into the site by about 25%. So when you read the draft DIS and you look at alternative 1, you'll see that we've got, during operations, we've got 34 vehicles making round trips into the site every day, and you'll see that that's listed as vehicle passes, so that number is 68. By generating lime on site, we reduce that down to 25 vehicles making round trips per day, or 50 AADT. So that's a 25% reduction in traffic. We use a lot of lime. Lime is very important for controlling pH in our ore processing operations. It's extremely important in the cyanidation circuit to maintain an appropriate pH so we don't generate hydrogen cyanide gas. We use a lot of lime and some limestone. So a good thing that we incorporated into the ModPRO relative to the Pro. The TSF, again, is on the southwest end of the site here. The ModPRO includes some tweaks to the liner design for the TSF. I don't know how familiar you may be with the cyanidation rule. You know, we permit this tailing storage facility and our cyanidation facilities in general through DEQ. So relative to the Pro, where we had a proposed liner design system, we made some tweaks to that. We added a geosynthetic clay laminate as an underlayer to enhance the efficacy of that liner, a few other tweaks. But another component to the ModPRO, improving the liner system for the TSF with a couple of tweaks. Number 4 here is surface water management. There were some very simple things we did in the ModPRO, rerouting the direction that diversion channels were flowing, but you'll see that this feature around the TSF, this little blue line, this is to divert run-on water that's coming down the hill and would run onto the TSF if not otherwise diverted. We want to keep as much clean water clean as possible at the site, so these diversion channels are very important for capturing that run-on water, diverting it around these disturbance features, and getting it back into the main channel of the river as clean water. Then we don't have to manage it. It doesn't pick up impacts from these disturbance areas. It's just a good practice, and it maintains flows in the river. One of the things that happens when you do that is if that water is exposed at the surface, underneath the hot summer sun, it can increase in temperature. So we also made a tweak to these diversion channels to pipe that water during low flows to keep that water cool. Again, something that surfaced in the environmental analysis and modeling, and a tweak we made to the plan to make it a better plan so that it could be considered in the draft DEIS. Number 5 here is not on this map. Our offsite maintenance facility is down near Landmark. It was proposed to be near Landmark, a historic Forest Service station, and we moved it a few miles up our proposed mine access road to get it away from that historical feature. So pretty simple fix. We also put it in one of our borrow source areas to have that disturbance area do double duty and utilize that area for more than one purpose. Number 6 is our mine access road. We propose to connect the existing Burnt Log Road with Meadow Creek Lookout Road and Thunder Mountain Road to develop a designated mine access route. And it's safer. There's less environmental risk. We'll talk a little bit more about that, because it is very definitely one of the focus areas of an alternative. So I'll show you a map of that. But in the ModPRO, we made a tweak to that routing to reduce wetland impacts, to reduce verticality of that road, and cut down on vehicle emissions, and just to make the road safer. So I'll show you a figure of that here in a little bit. Another major feature or component that came out of the alternatives development process and the public comment process is through site public access. Now, I showed you on the big figure that currently you can drive through the STIBNITE site. If you're coming in from Yellow Pine here on the north on STIBNITE Road, you can pass through the site, drive by the existing Yellow Pine pit, continue through the site, and access Thunder Mountain Road. In the Pro, that access would be cut off for the life of the mine. We got a lot of public comment on that, so we tweaked that and so that we would have public access through the site, and we can do that safely by routing a road around the west side of the Yellow Pine pit and having a designated public access road through the site. So that is incorporated into the ModPRO, and I think a lot of people were happy to see that because it would save them a lot of time driving around to access the Burnt Log Road. And then finally, number 8, we made a few power line route modifications. Just some micro siting to reduce, again, environmental impacts. In other cases, we didn't want to impact private land, so we made a couple tweaks for that power line route. So a couple of figures here just to kind of blow up these areas and reinforce these concepts for you. Here we're looking at the west end pit. Again, we in our original Pro had a feature here, the west end DRSF, and we do remove that in the Pro. And I see those questions, and I'm going to ask, and I'm going to answer them here in just a couple of minutes. This was another one I mentioned, the low flow piping and diversion channels. This is just you know, kind of a detail of what that would be. You know, this pipe would either be you know, buried under material adjacent to these channels, or in a channel under you know, gravel or riprap material. Again, to keep that water cool when it's flowing during low flow conditions. And then here's a diagram of our proposed liner system, which has a couple of layers of HDPE. And then I mentioned that GCL layer to add another layer of security against any potential leakage getting into the underlying aquifer. Number 4, you know, spoke a little bit to some surface water diversions. This is somewhat detailed, but you know, we have to divert Hennessy Creek around the Yellow Pine pit. And I'll mention that it's currently flowing to the north here, but we would plan to divert it to the south. And again, that's just to keep it away from some features, and it just makes sense to do so. Here's the Hanger Flats pit lake. You know, I mentioned we were going to put backfill in the pit lake to decrease the depth of that lake. Another feature or another tweak we made to this relative to the Pro was we were originally going to reroute Meadow Creek into this pit lake so that it would enter into the pit lake on the southern end here and exit here on the northeast end. Again, the modeling indicated that, you know, we could mitigate some temperature impacts and I believe some water quality impacts as well by not reconnecting Meadow Creek to into that Hanger Flats pit lake. I mentioned the burnt log route tweak we made to the routing. You know, this is the original route here in red. That this is just part of the burnt log route. Went down into a valley, had some wetland impacts. We tweaked that to get up higher on the ridge, reduce overall verticality to the road, reduce wetland impacts, etc. Here's a blow up of the public access road through the site. This is rotated so that north is to the left. Again, if you come in here from Stibnite on the lower left, you know, currently you can travel through the site on Stibnite Road. In the Pro, that access would be lost, but in the ModPRO Alternative 2, we do plan to have a through site public access road. Again, a designated road so that people aren't sharing the road with haul trucks. Also a seasonal road. This would be only available in non-winter conditions as it is currently. Oh, all right. This is a good place to stop for a moment and answer these questions. Let's see the projected lifespan of the liner. Gene, you are a resident expert on liners. Do you want to take that one?
Yeah, sure. So, and the life, maybe you won't be satisfied with the answer because the lifespan is not how it's measured. It's measured in half-life, which is the time to when half of a given property would be gone. So half of its strength, whatever. The half-life of these sorts of liners is 400 or 500 years in that buried condition. And so, you know, you've got probably upwards of 1,000 of a functional liner. But the important thing to understand as it relates to tailings is the tailings themselves, as they consolidate, you know, these are gold tailings, which tend to be on the finer grain side compared to, say, copper processing tailings. So gold tailings consolidate to quite low permeabilities in their own right. And the tailings at the bottom of the facility next to the liner, of course, are the oldest and most consolidated of those tailings. And those typically achieve permeabilities lower than compacted clay liners achieve in practice. So the liner is good for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not 1,000. And the tailings themselves are very tight well before, I mean, again, consolidation would be complete 30 years onward post deposition. So primary consolidation would be over in several decades, whereas the liner would last centuries but by the time the liner even would have lost half its strength, half its various permeability properties and so forth, the tailings will be so tight as to basically be a liner in their own right, and all the excess water will have been squeezed out basically and have reported to the top and been dealt with. They'll get to the WQ on P as we plan to treat that water in the long term while it's still coming out.
All right, thanks, Gene. Another question here about the burnt log route. The full connected route is the burnt log route to differentiate it from the burnt log road, which is a current feature. But the burnt log route is included in alternatives 1, 2, and 3. And I believe in all the alternatives in the draft DEIS, that is that will be accessible to the public. So I don't know if there's a follow-up to that, but some things were, considered, how would you, it would be very difficult to not have that be accessible to the public. But I believe that is accessible in all those alternatives. It's not accessible in alternative number 4 because alternative 4, as we'll show here in a moment, does not include the burnt log route at all. It includes an alternative mine access route. So the answer to that question is yes.
I should note, I don't believe it is accessible. The public can travel it, but I believe, and Dale, I think you know the answer for sure, but that there would not generally be a lot of pull-off ability there. And that was a wildlife mitigation measure where they didn't want to introduce a bunch more hunting pressure on some elk back there. And so I don't believe you would not have dispersed camping along the new segments of that route, as far as I understand it.
Yeah, it certainly would not be designed to be a public access route. It would be designed to be, a mine access road. There would, be year-round traffic on it. Perhaps a seasonal restriction even for public access. But I think those are things that will certainly be a topic of comments in the draft. But you're right, Gene. I don't think it's meant to be overly accommodating to public travel.
Well, it would be quite accommodating to travel and quite safer than the roads that exist now, but it would not be accommodating to stopping.
Yeah.
At least not in a new segment. So I don't recall what the ruling was on the other segments, but the brand new segment, the Pioneer part, would not be meant for folks to be able to stop, get out, camp, go hunting or something like that.
Well, and that's a good point. I wonder if the person asking the question was wondering if the current burnt log road section would remain accessible, or if they were asking about the full portion of the route. So if somebody wants to clarify that as we move forward here, please do so.
Yeah, and to that, yeah, we would, we are stepping off the current alignment in a few places because we can't meet grade requirements or curve requirements with the alignment that exists. And so in those cases, we're building new pieces of it essentially parallel to right beside the old, or maybe around the backside of a hill of a knob instead of around the front side and so forth. So there are a few of those cases, and I believe everything's access standpoint stays the same out there. It's just that we're stepping off the alignment slightly. And then there's another section that's all brand new, no current route, and that's the section I was speaking of a bit ago.
Okay, thanks, Gene. So I put this diagram up here to just kind of stress how, when we were analyzing the data, that was, to see what the effects of the PRO were going to be. These are the types of models that all the data was getting plugged into and churned through to get this preliminary effects analysis. So we've got, a site-wide water balance model. How is water moving across the site based on how we're using it, how it's being used to transport tailings to the TSF and then recover that water. There's a lot of water moving around the site, so we need to quantify that and understand it. Temperature modeling here, this green one down here. Again, temperature is very important to fisheries. So modeling the impacts to temperature was very important. And again, in some cases, we found areas where, increased temperatures could be mitigated by some simple fixes, such as that low flow piping. or not reconnecting the Meadow Creek back into the Hanger Flats Pit Lake. The hydrologic model, of course, is a very important model, that looks at the aquifers that are out at the site, and demonstrates or is used to predict how water is moving across the site, how much water is there and when, how deep these aquifers go, what we're doing at the surface, and how it can impact water quality. The hydrologic model is a very important framework for understanding how water is moving out at the site, both in the surface and subsurface. Then finally, the water chemistry model. Again, I mentioned there's mineralized material out at the site. There's legacy features out at the site. The water chemistry model allows you to understand, in the context of the hydrologic model, how is water quality being impacted? What's impacting it? How, can we quantify those impacts, or can we generate a model that can predict how those impacts may change as the mine progresses? Again, another very important model, and one that we looked at some of the results of it and made some tweaks to the PRO to mitigate some of those predicted impacts. And the water quality management plan, which is included in the draft as part of Alternative 2, I do want to stress that this water quality management plan is not exclusive to Alternative 2. This is a concept that was built based on Alternative 2, but the treatment that's proposed could be applied, ostensibly to any of the alternatives. I want to make that very clear. It's applied to Alternative 2 because that's the one for which we have the most information, have done the most study on. So, but this is just a diagram to demonstrate how the water quality management plan developed. The mine plan, the PRO, which is summarized in the PRO. You take that, and again, you apply these models like site-wide water balance, site-wide water chemistry, flow-weighted averaging, and water management planning. There's a lot of components to this, for us to understand where water is, what its quality is, how it's moving, and then to evaluate treatment systems or treatment methods for dealing with the types of contaminants that we have in the water, to effectively treat that water to a certain level of quality so that it can be released back into the environment. So very complex, but and summarized very simply here. But again, this was something that surfaced in the preliminary draft DEIS review, and something that we developed in more detail. This is just again another oblique aerial view of the site, and it illustrates what some of the components are of the water management plan. Again, routing clean water around these disturbance features to keep that water clean, collecting runoff water from disturbance features into these ponds, and then routing it to the water treatment plant, the central water treatment plant, which would be located in the general mill area in the central portion of the site. So again, keeping clean water clean, treating water that is impacted, and determining the types of technologies that we need to do that, not only during operations, but also in the long term. The plans for the water treatment plan, the predictive modeling results that we get that demonstrate that give us an idea of what this water quality is going to be in the long term, informs the water quality management plan, again, to treat water not only during operations, but in post-closure as well. There's a lot of diagrams in the water quality management plan. I'm just showing you this one as an example. The light colored pink line in the background is from our years and years of groundwater quality modeling, and illustrates the elevated concentrations, in this case of arsenic, that are over some certain regulatory thresholds. And then we demonstrate, again, in many graphs in the water quality management plan, the dark line here, which is the proposed water quality based on that post-treatment discharge into surface waters. And we are not, treating every drop of water in that drainage. We're treating the runoff that's coming from disturbance areas. So, to some degree, we're also, that water is still going to be impacted by, naturally mineralized areas that that will be there for centuries to come, and have been there for millions of years previously. So we are treating water to the discharge standards that will be held to in our IPDES permit, and providing, even despite those background conditions, providing overall benefit to water quality through that treatment.
And notably, sorry, Dale.
No, please.
Green line are the measured values. We've got baseline data of our own that goes back to 2012 or so. And so those green lines, the solid green is the average measured value in the river there, and the dotted one is the maximum measured value. So you see, with treatment, we have the effect of dropping us below what's in the river right now on average. So it does improve. It improves water quality. It's just that we can't treat every drop. We're treating the water off of our features, and so there are legacy features that aren't yet dealt with in this plot, because this is during ops, and there's some natural mineralization. There's nothing we can do.
Yep. Thanks for that clarification, Gene. So let's get back to the NEPA process. Again, the notice of availability has been published. The draft DEIS is on the street. It's out for public comment. Well, I'll show you these websites again here, where we, you can get project updates at the Forest Service website, and that will route you to a public comment processor, or where you can submit a public comment. We've also got some routes to public comment opportunities on our website, countidahoin.com. We'll talk about that in a little bit more here at the end. But just to kind of bring this all together, there are 5 alternatives in the draft DEIS. Alternative 1 is the PRO. Again, we've improved upon it. We can't imagine anyone would want to select the PRO because it's been improved upon and effects have been reduced. Alternative 2, the ModPRO, is what we feel it's certainly our preferred alternative, and we hope that people see that as the best option for our proposal moving forward, and for reducing environmental or potential environmental effects to the degree practicable at the site. We're going to talk a little bit about alternatives 3 and 4 very briefly. They focus around a couple of major features at the site, including the TSF and the mine access route. And then alternative 5 is the no action alternative. The project's not approved, nothing happens. None of the restoration benefits incorporated into the plan are achieved. The site will be left much as it is today. So please don't read this chart, but I just want to show you all the PRO. The first column here, alternative 1, the PRO. This is every aspect of the mine. All the details highlighted there in orange. And what I want to show you through the succession of these tables, so that's the PRO. In the ModPRO, second column, I mentioned we changed about 8 features of the mine. And that got packaged up into the ModPRO. So I ran through those with you. We talked about the water quality management plan, all the tweaks that we made to the project, our preferred alternative, certainly. And this is the diagram I showed you, but I'll jam by that. Okay, here's the agency action alternatives that we'll talk about in a little more detail. Alternative 3 focuses or rotates around an alternative TSF location. Tailings storage facility, which again, we put in the Meadow Creek Valley. This is a picture of our proposed TSF. This would occur in alternatives 1, 2, and 4 of the draft DEIS. You'll see that the tailings are impounded up gradient of this embankment. This embankment, which would be designed to meet the requirements of IDWR's dam safety program. And then an added feature that we put in this on the TSF is this 60-odd million tons of development rock in part from Hanger Flats to buttress that dam. You'll see down here in the foreground the SODA, the spent ore disposal area. I mentioned before that material gets incorporated into this initial embankment, allowing us to access the tailings underneath. So our proposed our proposal included in the ModPRO and our preferred tailing storage facility location. Alternative 3 moves the tailing storage facility location to the upper east fork of the south fork of the Salmon River. Again, same amount of tailings impounded, similar dam construction, added development rock storage facility to buttress that dam. We don't like this location for several reasons. One of which is there's a very large slide. You can see the scarp in this photo. This is a geohazard that could potentially impact the stability of this feature. We also don't like that this impacts more undisturbed area than our proposal for the Pro TSF. And you'll see where our Pro TSF, you'll see the soda here. So our TSF is to the right of about the central portion of this area. But one of the things about alternative 3 is that whereas we would not disturb this area, the soda and underlying Bradley tailings would not be repurposed and reprocessed in alternative 3. So a major restoration feature of this project would not be realized in alternative 3. Among some other changes, rerouting the access road to come through blowout, moving the housing facility, etc. But again, I showed you these photos earlier. These are photos of fisheries habitat in the upper east fork of the south fork. So mentally compare this in your mind to the riprap line channel in Meadow Creek, and you'll see why we believe that the Pro TSF and the ModPRO TSF, same thing, are a better option than alternative 3. Finally, alternative 4, the Yellow Pine route. This alternative, again, an agency action alternative, but this focuses on alternative mine access, an alternative mine access route, the Yellow Pine route. What this basically means is that the existing road into the site, here's Johnson Creek, going from Landmark up to Yellow Pine, and then Stibnite Road, again, existing roads coming into the site, would be the mine access route. Burnt log route would never be constructed. We don't like this option because Johnson Creek Road and Stibnite Road travel very closely to rivers. Within many cases, or several miles, they're within 100 feet of rivers. So, having, I mentioned the level of traffic we would have on this route, having all that traffic so close to these rivers, we feel is not a good option. Part of the design of the burnt log route, which you'll see here in this rust colored, this is our proposed mine access route included in both alternatives 1, 2, and 3, I believe. But in any case, higher up in the drainages, it crosses drainages rather than runs parallel to them. Since it's higher up on slopes, it's less apt to be impacted by avalanches. And I'm going to show you a photo here from the Stibnite Road corridor. You'll see on this north-facing slope right here, we have recurrent avalanche chutes that generate avalanches. Not every year, but we had, I believe, in the 2019 season, we had 4 or 5 of them. This was one of the larger ones that came across the East Fork, South Fork Salmon River drainage and obliterated portions of the road. Took us several months to fix that. So, there's not only a health and safety concern here, but also, whereas we would only have one way in and out of the mine, this could generate a lot of problems for keeping people from getting in and out of the mine. So, to summarize, we see a lot of benefits for the ModPRO, or alternative 2 in the draft DEIS. It's a refined version of the Pro. I illustrated to you those refinements that we made that reduce environmental impacts, make for a better project. They reduce the disturbance footprint of the project overall by approximately 65 acres. They maximize the use of previous disturbance areas. Unlike something like alternative 3, which puts the TSF in a relatively untouched drainage, reduces potential environmental impacts, which we've demonstrated through our modeling. It incorporates best management practices to achieve some of those reduced water temperatures. I mentioned some of the surface water management tweaks, not only for moving water around the site, but also for treating water. The WQMP is incorporated into alternative 2, although it can be applied to any alternative, the concept of water treatment. We believe it's the best and safest option for mine access on a burnt log route. It reduces the environmental risk of that road by getting it away from rivers. And we believe that the best reclamation and restoration benefits, i.e. ensuring that we, maximize the restoration of features like soda, which would not be reclaimed in alternative 3. It's got the best options for that. So I think we're about out of time here. So Shelley, do you want to sum things up here, and we'll see if there's any more quick questions? If you're still there.
I am. I was just having a hard time getting my mute button. Sorry, guys.
Right.
Does anybody have any questions? Okay. Well, feel free to put them in the Q&A box while I go over this screen or this slide. As Dale mentioned before, we are right in the middle of our comment period. So we are asking people to write in and support our project. And we have 3 major asks for you guys. The first one is to write a letter, and you can do that a few different ways. You can go to the Forest Service website and submit it straight through the Forest Service, or you can go on to countidahoin.com and get started on your letter. There's several different options for you to choose language and just get some more information on our project if you're just kind of having a hard time getting started on that letter. And you can always reach out to us at community@midasgoldinc.com with any questions or thoughts. And you can always visit any of our webinars that we have going 3 times a week through the comment period. Our second ask is to tell your network. Share it with your friends and family. Let them know that we're in the middle of our comment period and that we are asking for comments and that we're happy to help in any way that we can, and that you would love for them to support our project as well. And the third is to just share your support with your network on social media. Share it on your Facebook account, Instagram, LinkedIn, or Twitter. We have posts that we put up on a daily basis. You're welcome to share those. Or if you'd like to do your own, we can help you with that as well. Really what we are here for is to help you get your comment letter of support for our project in before October 13th. So that is our ask for you. We really appreciate all of your time today on the webinar. And I think, I don't think we have any other questions. So if that's all, thank you guys very much. We appreciate it, and we hope to see you again soon.
Thanks, everybody. See you next time.